The year was 2007 and Naughty Dog just released Uncharted: Drake's Fortune, a third-person action-adventure game clearly inspired by the likes of Tomb Raider and Indiana Jones. It was Naughty Dog's first foray into something serious and less cartoony, and it was a huge turning point for Sony in general. While the PS1 and the PS2 also had great exclusive games, it was in that mid-PS3 era where the term Sony first party really started to hold some weight. Back when I was a kid and an early teenager, nobody was really using the terms AA, AAA, first party, third party, at least not in my circle. But like I said, this was the time where Sony first party games, Sony exclusive games, really started to turn some heads. You had two exclusive FPS series with Resistance: Fall of Man in 2006 and the Killzone games, which actually started a generation prior. You also had 3D mascot platformers like Ratchet & Clank: A Crack in Time, you had cartoony 2D platformers like Little Big Planet, and you have the aforementioned third-person action-adventure game Uncharted: Drake's Fortune. This was also a time where Sony was either developing or publishing a lot of weirder smaller games like Loco Roco, SingStar, Journey, Mod Nation Racers, and also their Smash clone that completely flopped. They may have not gotten the PS3 generation off to the best start, and maybe not every game I just listed was an absolute gem, but the variety shown here was honestly admirable. They may have had the most variety on the market at the time, and their support of indie games was absolutely phenomenal. They were ahead of the game when it came to indie support. So what am I getting at? This is Uncharted: Drake's Fortune, a third-person action-adventure game. This is Uncharted 2 and 3. They obviously have the same formula, just improved. This is The Last of Us, which takes that formula, lowers the amount of combat, makes it slower and slightly more stealth-based, but the same core gameplay. This is God of War, a third-person action-adventure game with RPG elements and a slightly more open world. This is Days Gone, a third-person action-adventure game with an open world. This is Ghost of Tsushima, a third-person action-adventure game with an open world. This is Horizon, a third-person action-adventure game with an open world and RPG elements. This is God of War Ragnarok, the same formula as its predecessor. Their support of indies today is basically non-existent. They shut down Japan Studio, which put out some of my favorite weird games ever made. Both of their FPS series are just nowhere to be seen. If Drake's Fortune was a first foray into a new direction for Sony, The Last of Us was a confirmation of that direction that we still see them in today. And before anyone thinks I'm hating, Uncharted is one of my favorite franchises ever, and The Last of Us is probably like a top 10, top 5 game for me. I really have to sit and think about it, but it's up there. I love a lot of their games. If you're a console manufacturer, you want your lineup to be like a box of crayons. You want a whole variety of shades and colors, and guess what? There's not many people who open a box of crayons and use every single color. I myself barely use yellow or brown, which for this example, let's say is online games, right? I barely play online games. But you know what? I'm glad that the yellow and brown crayons are in there just in case one day I want to use them, just in case one day I want to online game. Sony in the PS1, PS2, and PS3 generation was like that 48 pack of crayons that you would see your classmates have and you would get jealous because you only have a 24 pack. They had everything you wanted on their consoles. But with the recent confirmations of a God of War TV show, a Horizon TV show, a Horizon sequel, a Horizon remake, and VR games, The Last of Us sequel, The Last of Us TV show, it's safe to say we're strictly in an era that Sony cares less and less about taking artistic chances and more about making blockbuster games. Just look at what happened to Days Gone. That game absolutely made a profit, but it wasn't enough for Sony to greenlight a sequel. And when you look at the way they're locking down exclusivity rights for games like Stellar Blade, Final Fantasy XVI, Silent Hill 2 Remake, it looks like they're looking towards third parties to lock down that variety that they used to have in-house. Think about how scared they've been at the idea of losing Call of Duty in that Microsoft-Activision merger that is still going on today. Why? Well, obvious profit aside, if Sony loses Call of Duty, that's like the world's most famous and beloved crayon being stolen from your crayon box. That's like not having blue, red, or green in your crayon box. You absolutely need it. And it's just funny when you really lay everything out on the table. Sony are game makers. Why don't they just make a game to compete with Call of Duty? Well, maybe it's because they don't have the faith that they can do it. Maybe they just don't want to. They love their gritty, serious, third-person, over-the-shoulder action-adventure games. There's a reason that Sony became a meme for a little bit with their dad simulators, with God of War and The Last of Us. But what really frustrates me with Sony today is, why does everything have to be a blockbuster? Why does everything have to be a franchise? Why does every game need multiple $100 million budget? Would it really kill Sony to create a $10 million budget, digital only, $29.99 Parappa the Rapper 3? Yeah, it'll satisfy a much more niche and smaller audience, but doesn't that just look good? Doesn't that feel good as an artistic company to have that variety? Like right now I'm playing through the Gravity Rush games and I can't believe there's only 2 of them. Where's Gravity Rush 3? There should be more Gravity Rush. Sony, people want more Little Big Planet. People want more Resistance and Killzone. A franchise shouldn't just stop at 2 or 3 games. That would be like if Nintendo stopped making Zelda games after Link's Awakening or stopped making Mario games after Mario 3. Most people don't even start with those games when they're first entering the franchise. And before anyone wants to say that I'm a hypocrite or contradicting myself, sequels are absolutely fine, but nobody wants a stagnant rhythm. Nobody wants The Last of Us, God of War, Horizon, The Last of Us, God of War, Horizon. You want to throw little things in there to just spice it up. Even if it's, like I said, a smaller, digital-only, less than retail price release. Just get experimental again. Remember what happened in 2016 when Sony was just kind of like, blah, let's remake the first Ratchet and Clank and sell it for $40. Well, guess what? It was a smash hit. And in case you guys don't remember, the only reason that game was really made was to support the upcoming film, and the film flopped and the game did amazing. Look what happened to God of War. They didn't give up on God of War, right? They never said after the 3rd or 4th game, like, let's stop this. They just kept going. And at this current point, God of War is a huge, iconic name. It's probably in like the top 25 most known video game series. Like if you walk up to a stranger and say, do you play God of War? They probably have some idea of what you're talking about. And what bums me out about God of War specifically, right, if we go back to the crayon analogy, is that if you look at it, The Last of Us and Uncharted would be one crayon. And then you would have God of War, which was a more almost hack and slash beat 'em up type game back in the PS2, PS3 generations. So 2 different crayons. But then, starting with God of War 2018, they made it so much more like The Last of Us. You have the child companion, the game camera is different, everything is slower, the combat isn't like The Last of Us, it's a little bit more hack and slashy, but it's not to the point where I can call it a straight up hack and slash beat 'em up game. So in a way, Sony lost one of their crayons and now they just have 2 of the same crayon. You open the crayon box up and you have 2 green crayons but no blue. Why? I'm worried that Sony is going to be a box of gray crayons. And hey, I like some of those gray crayons. I even love some of them. But we need variety. I miss the experimental, smaller games. I miss the games that we still talk about today that they published, like Fat Princess. What even was that? But with the massive successes of the PS4 and the PS5, who am I to say? Maybe I'm wrong. I just have this gut feeling that by the end of the PS5 generation, this is going to be a massively outspoken complaint. Sony, you need variety. And while seeking talented third parties like Square Enix is a good idea, it's not a replacement for making that variety in-house. I guess what I'm saying is, make Parappa the Rapper 3. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe, like, comment, share the video. See you guys.